I'm Juliet Jules Vance, 27. The alleged family disappointment who earns her rent by turning other people's chaos into streamlined ad campaigns. 2 Fridays ago, I tottered into the marble ballroom of the Grand Meridian Hotel, carrying a tissue-papered gift bag that cost half a week of groceries. I expected forced small talk, maybe a few patronizing eye rolls, and then a quick escape. Instead, I walked out with copper-tasting blood in my mouth, a fist-sized patch of hair missing from my scalp, and a decision burning so bright inside me that it drowned out the pain. The occasion was my older brother Mason's promotion party. At 30, he'd become the youngest project director in North Star Aerospace's history, and Dad Victor, 55, intended to make that triumph the city's social headline. He'd rented the Meridian's chandelier-crusted ballroom, hired a string quartet, imported champagne from Reims, even staged a photo backdrop with the company logo repeating like wallpaper. Mom Lorraine, 53. Floated from table to table, draped in pearls, greeting anyone with a title or a trust fund. I stood at the wall hugging the gift bag like riot gear, praying no one would remember that I existed long enough to ask what I do for a living. I should have left the moment I realized the event felt less like a celebration and more like a coronation. Instead, I pasted on my agency-trained smile and watched Mason accept congratulations with the casual arrogance of a man who's never known what it feels like to be overlooked. Every compliment landed on him like confetti. Every good-natured joke at my expense bounced off me like gravel. I told myself, be gracious, family first, a polite slice of hell. The first blow wasn't a fist, it was a sentence. Mason caught my eye across a circle of his North Star buddies and called Jules, still freelancing. That's adorable. You can design my retirement slideshow someday. His friends chuckled. My cheeks flushed molten, but I shrugged. Sure. Just forward the brief alongside my consulting rate. A ripple of amusement from the group devolved into a hush when Dad stepped in. Victor Vance does not tolerate backtalk, especially from the daughter he's spent a decade labeling potential wasted on whimsy. His jaw flexed. Watch your tone. I was joking, Dad. Mason can afford me. North Star's generous. Only because some of us understand real work, Mason added, raising his champagne. Mom's tinkling laugh landed like broken glass. With surgical precision, they carved the floor around me until I became an exhibit. Here stands the underachiever. I'd endured worse, but that night, a live wire of anger sizzled at the base of my spine. Anger not just at the cruelty, but at my own complicity. I'd shown up hoping they might finally see me, but the cost of visibility in this family was always humiliation. Sparks meet gunpowder. During Dad's speech, he praised Mason's grit and ethics, extolled his own mentorship, and thanked Mom for setting the standard of elegance. He did not say my name. He never does on important nights. So when the applause died and guests drifted toward fresh drinks, I told myself, leave. Slip out before they reload. I reached the coat alcove when Mason's voice boomed behind me. Jules at least signed the guest book so Mom can brag she raised 2 kids. I turned, sure, but remind her I paid half the tuition for that education she brags about. My brother's smirk faltered. Dad looked up from his bourbon eyes, already glassy. What tuition? The words escaped before caution could leash them. The flights, the lobbying dinners, the donations that paved your latest title that money came from my trust. Conversations nearby stopped mid-sentence. Dad's face blotched crimson. What did you say? Check the accounts, Victor. You diverted my fund last spring. I expected denial, maybe a threat. I didn't expect the swing. His fist crashed against my cheekbones so loud, the quartet faltered mid-waltz. Stars exploded in my vision. Gasps gusted around us like wind through leaves. Before I registered the pain, Dad's hand fisted into my hair, yanking me forward. He dragged me the length of the ballroom, my heels scraping my lungs, pumping air that refused to reach my brain. Mom covered her mouth, but she was smiling. Mason clapped once, twice, slow and mocking. Told you she'd make it about herself. No one moved. Not the executives who'd toasted my brother, not the relatives who'd cooed over Mom's pearls, not the childhood friend I'd once bailed out of a bad drunk driving call. 70 people froze behind their champagne flutes, fascinated by the spectacle, yet terrified of stepping between Victor Vance and his chosen target. Concrete and car alarms. The hotel's side corridor smelled of lemon polish and air-conditioned chill. Dad hurled me through the exit. Metal crashed against drywall. My knees gave out palms skidding across textured concrete. I tasted blood coppery and insulting and coughed it onto my dress. Dad's shoes appeared in my periphery, polished black leather perfect for boardrooms and beatdowns alike. Get up! Get out! We're done! The door slammed. Silence swallowed the impact. For a full 10 seconds, I kneeled there, collecting myself piece by jagged piece. Then survival mode kicked in, document. Get safe. Call help. I wobbled to my feet, staggered to the parking deck. Under fluorescent buzz, I toggled my phone's camera and recorded each angle, split lip, torn scalp. Swelling cheek, rotating slowly like a forensic statue. Evidence. In the driver's seat of my battered Corolla, I locked the doors, set the phone on speaker, and scrolled to Harper Lynn. Back in college, we'd been debate partners. I'd covered her rent during bar prep after her father cut her off. She answered on the third ring, voice groggy. Jules. Everything okay, no? I need legal artillery by sunrise. Where are you heading home? I'll send photos. A pause, then steel in her tone. Bring your ID, every financial document you can dig up, and whatever courage you've got left. My office, 8 a.m. We end them. Second call. Glenn Ortiz, retired homicide detective, turned private investigator. Also my downstairs neighbor, with a 6'2" frame and a moral compass that points due justice. His voicemail clicked on. I spoke fast. Family assault, trust fund theft. Need surveillance footage, witness lists, and personal safety check. I'll cover your fee. I barely finished before his text popped up. Already retrieving hotel camera feeds. Stay locked in. Gee. I drove in autopilot adrenaline, fueling the wipers, even though the sky was clear. By the time I reached my apartment, shock had drained, leaving rage steady and cold. I showered blood off my chin-wrapped ice in a dish towel for my jaw, and spread financial statements across my kitchen table like war plans. Every highlighted withdrawal told a story money meant for my education, rerouted to Mason's flight lessons. Emergency funds borrowed for Dad's failed vineyard. My entire trust siphoned to pay North Star's sponsorship buy-ins. Midnight. I emailed Harper the photos with a bullet point timeline of theft and abuse. 017. Glenn sent a Dropbox link hotel hallway camera footage, plus a 30-second clip a guest had posted, then deleted on social media. My father's fist, my brother's applause, Mom's delighted grin. My chest tightened, but I kept watching until the rage settled into something sharper purpose. A mirror unbroken. At 2 a.m., I faced the bathroom mirror. The stranger staring back had a split lip bruises blooming like violets, and eyes I barely recognized, eyes not of a victim, but of a fuse already lit. I whispered to the reflection, they wanted me silent. They forgot I build brands for a living. I can burn one down too. I opened a blank document titled Statement, Vance Family Abuse and Financial Fraud. First line, I did not start this war, but I am ending it. The words poured out years of gaslighting, the theft burrowed into bank ledgers. The slap that split my childhood the moment tonight when 70 people pretended civility mattered more than a bleeding woman. I wrote until dawn, painted the windows ash blue. Sunrise resolve, birds chirped like nothing revolutionary had happened. I dressed in jeans, an oversized hoodie, and sunglasses big enough to hide Jupiter. My jaw ached each time I swallowed, but pain felt incidental. I stuffed the printed bank statements, Glenn's flash drive, and a phone charger into a messenger bag, then scrawled a post-it for myself. Return a different woman. Downtown's Saturday traffic was mercifully thin. I parked outside Harper's glass-paneled office tower at 0758, grabbed 2 coffees from the lobby kiosk, and rode the elevator with a steadiness that surprised me. She opened the door before I knocked, eyes darting to my bruises, rage flaring behind her glasses. He did that. Yes, I said, voice clear. And this, I lifted the folder, is how he paid for Mason's throne. We spread documents over her conference table. Harper photographed every page, logged each transfer into a case management system, and called a trauma clinic to schedule my medical exam. Paper trail first body evidence, Second witness outreach, third. She clicked her pen. They'll expect you to hide. You're going public. The idea tasted like electricity. What if they try to buy me off before that? Then we leak everything. I thought of Dad's polished shoes, Mom's pearls, Mason's smug grin. Let's make them pay retail. An unexpected ally. Noon. My phone buzzed from Glenn. Need you downstairs ASAP, found more. Harper waved me off. Go, I'll keep scanning. Glenn lived in a rent-controlled unit, smelling of strong coffee and gun oil. He slid a manila envelope across his scarred kitchen table. Inside shell company registrations, dummy account numbers, and internal email chain between Mason and a North Star procurement officer. One line glowed neon in my brain, funds secured courtesy of the sisters' dormant trust. Dad handled the paperwork. I swallowed bile. Where'd you get this friend in financial crimes owes me? This is felony-level misappropriation, kid. You think they'll see jail time if the DA's hungry? Glenn leaned forward. Question is, you ready to take family to court? My answer surprised even me. I'm ready to take them to the cleaners. Confrontation, round 1. Armed with Glenn's intel, Harper drafted demand letters and filed an emergency protective order. Before serving papers, we decided on a courtesy call, give them one honorable exit. We put the phone on speaker in her office. Dad answered after 2 rings, voice crisp, as though he hadn't shattered my face 14 hours ago. Juliet, Victor. My tone could freeze oceans. You emptied my trust, assaulted me, and let a crowd watch. You have 90 minutes to wire full restitution and sign a public apology. A scoff crackled through the speaker. You're hysterical. Withdraw these threats before you embarrass yourself. Offer rescinded, Harper said, and hung up. She met my eyes. Well, that settles negotiation. I smiled, really smiled for the first time since childhood. Good. I prefer litigation. The door. I won't close, back at my apartment. I pinned a timeline across the living room wall, dates, transfers, witnesses, potential allies. It looked like a detective show's murder board. And in a way, it was the slow murder of a daughter's dignity, finally mapped in daylight. At sunset, I video-called my best friend Eve, a documentary editor in Portland. I need a favor, I said. Want exclusive footage of a corporate dynasty imploding. Her eyes widened. Send me everything. I'll package a teaser by tomorrow night. Before bed, I stood again before the mirror. Bruises purpled deeper, but beneath them I saw steel. I touched the tender patch where hair was ripped free and whispered, grow back stronger. Then I turned off the light, slid my phone onto the nightstand, and despite throbbing pain, slept like a stone. For the first time in my life, my future felt under new management mine. Dawn seeped through my blinds like spilled gold, and for a heartbeat, I pretended I was waking from an ordinary Saturday. But the stiffness in my jaw reminded me that ordinary had died in the Meridian corridor. I showered, coaxed a brush through the ragged patch where Dad's fist had harvested my hair, and dressed in soft cotton that wouldn't complain when the doctor palpated the bruises. Harper had booked the trauma clinic for 7:30, slipping me between 2 car accident victims because documentation waits for no one. The physician, a compact woman with tired eyes, recorded every abrasion-measured swelling, photographed the crescent-shaped cuts made by Dad's ring, and typed impassively while I relived the blow in present tense. When she finished, the phrase consistent with blunt force assault glowed on the report like a neon verdict. Outside, Harper whisked the envelope into her bag, murmuring that evidence ages like milk and we were refrigerating it in the cloud before lunch. Glenn met us on the sidewalk, long coat flapping, holding coffee, and something heavier, a manila folder marked Source Kestrel. He waited until we were inside Harper's tinted SUV before opening it. Inside lay printouts of internal North Star emails that made my stomach loop, Mason pressuring a quality control manager to backdate safety tests, promising private compensation, courtesy of VVF Trust. The initials were mine. The manager's name is Daria Soto Glenn, said eyes in the rear view scanning traffic. She reached out this morning after the party clip started bouncing around private group chats. She's willing to talk if she gets whistleblower protection. Harper's grin was predatory. She saw a broader battlefield forming. We spent the drive cross-referencing dates, building a timeline so tight, even an expensive defense team couldn't pry it open. At precinct headquarters, I filed an assault report. The duty sergeant raised an eyebrow when he read Victor's name. My father had endowed the department's youth leadership fund 2 years ago, but the body cam made him professional. He took my statement, logged the photos, scheduled a detective follow-up, then handed me a copy thick with official weight. Protective order paperwork followed. Dad would be served by evening, whether he was golfing, scheming, or rehearsing a denial. By noon, the local news cycle had mutated from distinguished executives' daughter claims abuse to aerospace safety whistle could cost taxpayers millions. Dad's PR consultant tried to drown the story in syrup, releasing a statement about family turmoil and unfounded rumors. But the internet devoured syrup and demanded blood. North Star's legal team panicked, placing Mason on administrative leave and announcing an independent audit. Stock price hiccuped, analysts refreshed feeds, and my phone blinked with hashtags that welded my name to the scandal. Amid the chaos, I kept a promise to Harper and attended the first therapy session she'd arranged. Dr. Amina Larkin looked 30, but had the calm of old stone. She listened while I outlined decades of microcuts that tallied into the gash of Friday night, then asked a question no one ever had. What would justice feel like in your bones? I answered without thinking, breathing without shrinking. She wrote that down and said we'd build the muscles for it. Outside her office, a rainless thunderstorm grumbled. Thunder always reminded me of Dad pounding the table during childhood debates, so I welcomed its growl as background noise to my new life. Back at my apartment building, the elevator doors opened to reveal a bouquet of lilies, the size of a toddler, blocking the hallway. A white card perched on top. "End this charade, come home, family. Forgives everything." No signature, just a phone number I recognized as Mom's burner. I nudged the vase aside with my boot and let the elevator swallow it whole. 15 floors down, the doors reopened, and the bouquet toppled onto the lobby tiles while I walked out. Across town, Harper and Glenn were staging their own floral arrangement. They served Dad the restraining order by taping it to the wrought iron gate of his country club luncheon, alongside a blown-up still of his fist connecting with my face. Witnesses reported he tore the paper, then the photo, then the gate's keypad nearly off its post. By evening, digital forensics from Glenn's contact unpacked a hidden spreadsheet inside one of Dad's shell company drives. It showed quarterly payouts to 6 officials whose signatures appeared on Mason's accelerated clearance forms. Dollar amounts, routing numbers, memos like consulting retainer. The corruption had veins wider than we'd imagined. Harper phoned a federal prosecutor she'd clerked for. The line crackled, terse questions flew, and by 6, he requested a meeting quiet room, no phones 8 a.m. Monday. My world narrowed to tasks, cross-check payments, map relationships, prepare to detonate. Amid spreadsheets, my screen flashed with an incoming video call from a contact labeled Calico. I hesitated, then answered. The face belonged to my older cousin Nora, once my secret ally, before she married a venture capitalist and vanished into Malibu sunsets. She skipped greetings. Juliet. They're liquidating assets. Mason moved $2 million to a Singapore account, noon PST. Thought you should know. I exhaled gratitude. Alliances were forming in shadows Dad couldn't light. I forwarded the info to Harper, who instructed Glenn to draft an emergency injunction freezing foreign transfers. Night fell again, but I refused sleep. Adrenaline made a feast of fatigue. I prepared a digital Dropbox for investigative journalist Sienna Rojas, famous for dismantling a pharmaceutical empire last year. At midnight, I hit send documents, timestamps, the unedited video, the medical report, a memo titled, "Rotten Altitude, How North Star's Fast-Track Culture Endangers Lives." Within 20 minutes, she replied with a single word, confirmed. That same hour, Daria, the engineer, agreed to meet us in a motel parking lot near the airport. Harper insisted I stay behind, but Daria refused unless I was present. She said victims deserve transparency. Glenn drove while lightning stitched the sky. Daria arrived in a beat-up hybrid, eyes sleepless, clutching a flash drive like a passport. She said Mason had forced her team to skip a vibration stress test on a critical satellite component, bribing her supervisor with my trust fund money. Failure mid-orbit could scatter debris across 3 continents. She also revealed Mason kept a hard-copy logbook, his paranoia trophy in the safe at Dad's lake house. My pulse pounded. I'd picnicked by that house as a child, never knowing it stored proof of crimes financed by my future. We promised Daria anonymity and slid her into Harper's witness prep pipeline. Back home, thunder rolled distant. City lights winked under wet streets. My inbox overflowed with stranger stories, employees fired by dad girls, bullied by Mason neighbors who'd seen Mom fake charity receipts. Each tale added mass to the momentum. At 3 a.m., my apartment buzzer screeched. Heart ricocheted, but Glenn stationed in the hallway armchair, since dusk was quicker. He yanked the door open to reveal nobody. Only an envelope sealed with red wax and a single typed sentence, "Silence ends storms." Inside lay a thumb drive. Glenn ran a portable sandbox. The drive contained a doctored video splicing clips of me yelling in childhood arguments with Dad designed to paint me as unstable. We laughed an exhausted, incredulous sound because the desperation was clumsy. Harper uploaded the file to the cloud with a watermark reading Tampering Exhibit C. Dawn approached again, flush with possibility. We had 48 hours before the federal meeting, 86 before the first civil hearing. My reflection in the window caught me off guard. Even under bruises, I looked tall. I whispered the answer to Dr. Larkin's question, shaping it into vow. Justice feels like standing my full height. I spent sunrise scripting my court statement, mindful to root each allegation in verifiable evidence. Emotion would come through the facts. Mid-morning Sunday, Mom called. I considered letting it rot in voicemail, but curiosity won. Her voice was raw silk fraying at the edges. "Juliet, your father's blood pressure spiked. The doctor says he needs rest. If you love him, you'll stop this." I pictured her wrist resting on his chair, diamonds catching lamplight while nurses adjusted his meds. If he'd loved me, he'd never have started. I replied, ending the call before she weaponized guilt. By afternoon, an alert pinged North Star shares suspended pending investigation, a rare corporate tourniquet. Mason's executive badge deactivated. He tried tailgating through security and was escorted out. Someone filmed the moment. The clip trended under #GoldenBrotherGone. Meanwhile, Glenn and 2 trusted deputies executed a midnight run on the lake house. They breached the safe with a stethoscope and patience. Inside were bearer bond certificates, a passport under Mason's middle name, and the fabled logbook. On its leather cover in silver ink, Mason had scrawled, "Always bet on the eldest." The pages chronicled every illicit transaction, color-coded blue. For bribes, green for insider trades, red for family reallocations from my trust. At the back, a tab labeled Contingencies listed forged psychiatric evaluations, claiming I was bipolar and unfit to manage assets. Dad and Mom had signed as concerned guardians. My vision blurred forced. They hadn't just stolen money, they'd plotted a narrative in which my sanity could be revoked at their convenience. Glenn photographed each page, then returned the book exactly as found. We wanted them unaware until the courtroom ambush. Monday dawned hot and bright, a paradoxical promise. In the federal building's nondescript conference room, I sat opposite Assistant U.S. Attorney Mark Chen, a man whose calm radiated like granite. He flipped through our binder, paused at the logbook scans, and said, "If corroborated, this is conspiracy wire fraud, possibly RICO." He promised subpoenas within 24 hours and witness shields for Daria and others. Walking out, Harper exhaled a laugh, halfway between relief and disbelief. "Your family built a castle on sand, and the tide just rolled in." News hit Dad mid-press conference. Cameras captured the moment an aide whispered, and his face drained to parchment. He stumbled, mumbled about misinformation, then vanished behind marble columns. Social feeds exploded power shift in real time. That evening, while Harper drafted amended complaints and Glenn updated security protocols, I sat on my balcony, watching city lights shimmer like restless fireflies. For once, they looked less like reminders of other people's triumphs, and more like signals spelling out Morse code, "Just for me, keep going." The breeze lifted my damaged hair, and I didn't flinch. Follicles would heal, and so would I. But the truth we'd set in motion had no reverse gear. I thought about the forged psychiatric files waiting in that safe about my mother's soft threats, disguised as concern about Mason's motto scrawled in silver. They believed hierarchy was destiny. They'd forgotten that the ground floor controls the building's foundation. Somewhere inside the courthouse system, a clerk stamped our final motion of the day, Vance vert Vance et al. Amended complaint, fraud assault conspiracy. The stamp echoed through legal servers' email inboxes, and very likely, Dad's fragile arteries. I closed my laptop, let the dark settle, and allowed myself one slow, unguarded smile. Phase 1 had been survival. Phase 2 was counterpunch. Phase 3 coming soon would be the knockout none of them saw hiding in my pocket. Tuesday arrived draped in electric humidity, the kind that frizzes hair and nerves alike. Yet inside Harper's office, the air felt icier than a morgue drawer. Overnight, the federal subpoenas we triggered had detonated across 3 states. Court-martials served Dad at his penthouse mason at a rented condo he thought the press couldn't find, and Mom while she was mid-facial at a spa that bragged about Zen privacy. Their frantic phone calls clogged my voicemail, but I let them rot in digital purgatory while I sipped green tea and annotated timelines. Harper paced reading live feeds North Star's board had voted to suspend all launches pending review. 2 senators demanded hearings on aerospace fraud. Talk show hosts debated whether blood loyalty still mattered in modern families. Glenn, propped against the window, with arms crossed, murmured that public opinion was rolling downhill like a boulder. And my parents were tied to the tracks. Mid-morning brought our next move depositions. In a beige conference room that smelled of toner and fear, Daria Soto sat across from federal investigators, voice shaking only once as she detailed how Mason forced her to falsify vibration stress data. When opposing counsel tried rattling her with jargon, Harper objected so crisply, the stenographer grinned. Daria handed over Sadie models, annotated in red, proving the satellite component could shear apart at 28,000 RPM. That failure zone crosses the eastern seaboard, she added. Jaws tightened. My turn followed. I narrated a lifetime in bullet-time trust siphons, emotional shrapnel the blow in the ballroom, each fact cross-stitched with documents. The prosecutor nodded often, asking for clarifications, instead of challenging credibility. A silent indicator, they already corroborated my claims. Outside cameras swarmed like mayflies. Glenn formed a moving wall while Harper delivered a 12-second soundbite about courage scaling faster than corruption. By dusk, cable news mixed split-screen footage of Dad's Lion Club speeches with the punch that cracked my cheekbone. The contrast simmered viewers' outrage to a boil. That night, the family counterstrike landed. At 2 a.m., Glenn's security app tripped. Someone tried jimmying my apartment door. He slipped into the hall service pistol holstered and confronted a suited courier clutching a thick envelope. The man bolted but left the package. Inside lay glossy dossiers labeled Juliet Vance Psychiatric Concern, stuffed with forged evaluations dated years prior and signed by a doctor who died last December. Harper's face when she saw them hardened into something volcanic. Obstruction and witness intimidation, she hissed, scanning signatures. She filed an emergency motion before sunrise. By 8, the judge slapped Dad's counsel with sanctions and ordered expedited discovery on any smear materials. Meanwhile, Dad's blood pressure episode blossomed into strategy. He'd checked into a cardiac wing, hoping the optics of a frail patriarch might soften headlines. It backfired when a nurse leaked footage of him shouting at staff for confiscating his phone. The clip rolled on morning television under banners reading "Executives Hospital Tirade." Tuesday afternoon, Mom played her last tender card. She arrived at my building, unannounced, flanked by a chauffeur, and the same lilies I'd drop-kicked. Glenn intercepted, but I allowed the meeting in the lobby cafe, cameras on for safety. She looked smaller than I remembered, foundation caked over sleepless eyes. "Your father could go to prison," she whispered, stirring tea she never drank. I watched sugar granules swirl. Consequences feel strange when you've outsourced them your whole life. She reached for my hand, found only air. Think of the family name. I thought of the forged psych reports waiting in evidence lockers. I said. I'm rebuilding its definition. Tears welled, real ones maybe, but manipulation dressed in grief still smelled the same. I stood, thanked her for confirming their desperation, and walked away. She didn't follow. That evening, Glenn's covert team executed Phase 3, revisiting the lake house safe this time in coordination with federal agents. They filmed Dad's accountant shredding files in the boathouse. Cuffs clicked, and the agent in charge phoned me so I could hear paper jam mid-destroy. An hour later, deputies served Dad with an arrest warrant for obstruction. Hospital physicians cleared him for transfer, and cameras caught the moment he was wheeled out, wrists chained to the gurney rail. Twitter's verdict: karma wears scrubs. Mason tried escaping via private jet from a regional airport. Homeland Security froze the tail number officers boarded and found him sweating behind tinted sunglasses, Singapore passport in hand. He screamed about diplomatic immunity, none existed, and was escorted down the stairs past reporters chanting, "Always bet on the eldest." The logbook's silver ink had become his ironic epitaph. With the principals detained, North Star's audit team contacted Harper seeking cooperation. They offered full transparency and a public apology in exchange for my testimony before their board. We counter-offered restitution of every stolen cent plus scholarship funds for employees terminated under Mason's tenure. They balked, then folded when Sienna Rojas published her expose, leaked call logs, bribery spreadsheets, and my unedited deposition clip. Stock-cratered board replaced the CEO, and our demands became their cheapest path to survival. Amid legal tremors, I kept therapy appointments. Dr. Larkin guided me through breathing routines that steadied adrenaline rushes. She reframed vengeance into reclamation, reminding me that burning bridges also lights the path forward. I began sketching again, charcoal portraits of satellite debris morphing into phoenix feathers, and Harper convinced a downtown gallery to exhibit them under the title Trajectory. Opening night sold out. Proceeds funded Daria's legal defense fund. The civil case status hearing arrived Wednesday. Courtroom B12 buzzed with journalists scribbling and defenders whispering. Dad gaunt but combative, flanked by two attorneys. Mom beside him, her pearl necklace swapped for understated diamonds. Mason in county-issue khaki, shackled at the ankles. I sat across the aisle with Harper, Glenn, Daria, and Nora, our impromptu coalition. The judge, unimpressed by theatrics, confirmed asset freezes, accepted new fraud counts, and set a joint criminal-civil calendar. Dad's counsel pleaded for leniency, citing medical fragility. The judge replied that respect for the law is the best treatment for hypertension. When proceedings adjourned, Dad locked eyes on me, something like bewilderment crossing his face, as if he'd discovered gravity only after stepping off a cliff. Outside microphones sprouted like weeds. I kept my statement brisk. Abuse is never a private matter. Theft is never a family misunderstanding. Accountability is healthcare for society. Reporters shouted questions, but I stepped into the sun, letting the weight of years fall from my shoulders. That night, alone on my couch, ice pack swapped for chamomile, I reread my childhood journals, pages filled with sketches of barred cages and stick-figure Juliet shrinking. I tore out one page, fed it to a candle flame, and watched fear curl into ash. Glenn texted Lake House safe, officially cataloged. Forged psych files, bearer bonds, and a list titled Plan D Conservatorship. Agents ecstatic. I replied with a single emoji, an anchor severed from its chain. Thursday morning, Sienna's follow-up article revealed Dad had lobbied lawmakers via dark money PACs. The corruption narrative widened from family drama to national scandal. Senatorial committees cued subpoenas. Donors distanced themselves. My parents' charity gala invitations evaporated overnight. Harper, pragmatic to the core, negotiated a preliminary settlement. My trust restored with compounded interest. Public apology broadcast during prime time, and a $20 million corporate fund for aerospace safety oversight named after the whistleblowers. I considered, then added one clause. Mom must donate her jewelry auction proceeds to domestic violence shelters. She balked until Mason, phoning from jail, screamed that they had no leverage left. Papers were signed Friday at dawn. I didn't attend. I was busy meeting with the dean of my old art school, arranging a scholarship for first-generation creatives. When the dean thanked me, I realized the bruise on my jaw had faded to pale yellow, healing not hiding. Weekend storms washed the city clean. I moved into a loft flooded with light, the kind you don't apologize for taking up. On the first night, I hosted a small gathering, Daria, Nora, Harper, Glenn, Dr. Larkin. Even the barista who'd slipped me extra espresso shots during deposition week. We toasted with sparkling water and cheap pizza, laughing in a room alive with reclaimed possibility. Somewhere across town, Dad awaited arraignment. Mom prepared for estate sales. Mason negotiated plea terms. Their silence no longer terrified me, it freed me. Before sleep, I stepped onto my balcony, inhaled rain-cooled air, and listened not for threats or sirens, but for my own heartbeat steady and unafraid. Justice, I realized, isn't thunder, it's the quiet after, when you finally hear yourself think. And in that hush, a new phase sparked, one not driven by revenge or defense, but by creation. The powder had burned the old edifice gone. Now the blueprint of something honest unfolded beneath my hands. Monday bled into Wednesday before I noticed the calendar life, now stitched together by subpoenas, therapy hours, and charcoal dust under my fingernails. Yet those days felt more mine than the 27 years that preceded them. While Dad awaited arraignment in a federal detention clinic, and Mason bargained through a maze of plea drafts, Harper turned our war room into a construction site for the future, whiteboards crowded with color-coded tasks, victim impact statements, restitution disbursement schedules, aerospace safety bill, language to be pitched on Capitol Hill. I learned that fighting corruption is less like a single knockout and more like chronic physical therapy, daily deliberate stretches that rebuild what was quietly torn. Glenn became command central for personal security, hiring a pair of off-duty marshals who shadowed me without suffocating my new freedom. Their presence proved prescient when an unmarked van circled my block twice at dusk. Plates traced back to a private intelligence firm Dad's attorneys retained the week before he was cuffed, a clumsy last gasp to harvest dirt that no longer existed. Harper filed a restraining addendum before sunrise, and the van never reappeared. Meanwhile, Sienna's investigative series triggered congressional rumblings. 2 representatives introduced the Aerospace Integrity and Safe Launch Act. Citing the courage of whistleblowers like Juliet Vance, hearing invitations followed, and I found myself rehearsing testimony in Dr. Larkin's office, practicing statements that balanced technical clarity with visceral truth. She taught me to ground my voice by pressing feet into the carpet, to let pauses breathe so listeners could absorb the weight instead of drowning in speed. Those tips would matter when cameras broadcast my words to millions, craving either validation or a new target. The gallery show Trajectory extended a second weekend pieces selling to collectors I'd once pitched ad campaigns to. Irony tasted sweet, but I priced modestly, funneling profits into the scholarship fund we'd seeded. Daria, now under federal protection, attended in a plain dress and ball cap eyes, bright with relief as patrons praised the work her testimony had indirectly inspired. In charcoal swirls, she recognized satellite struts and torque diagrams, haunting negative space proof that art and engineering speak dialects of the same language structure, failure redemption. Late Thursday, Harper's phone lit with an unfamiliar extension that made her straighten Department of Justice Public Integrity section. They confirmed sealed indictments against 3 North Star executives and 2 defense contract auditors who'd approved Mason's doctored reports. A cascade effect we'd hoped for but hadn't dared assume. When Harper relayed the news, I felt a spinal exhale, a release that started between shoulder blades and rippled outward as though my body finally trusted the ground. Yet headlines churned darker weather. Fringe commentators framed the scandal as proof modern daughters sabotage traditional families. Anonymous accounts peppered my feeds with gifs of falling rockets tagged #VanceCrash. Glenn's marshals filtered threats, but Dr. Larkin insisted I confront some, instead of surrendering public space. Her advice, visibility with boundaries, is agency. I drafted a calm thread debunking conspiracy tropes, pinned it, then logged off for 48 hours, denying trolls the oxygen of attention. While media spun personal fissures quieted, Nora visited my loft carrying a dented metal lunchbox. Inside lay Polaroids of us at 8, eating peanut butter sandwiches under the lake house pier. She apologized for ghosting when Malibu life seduced her. I forgave because survival loses value if grace never surfaces. That night, we assembled IKEA bookshelves while recounting childhood secrets. Dad's kingdom never stamped out Mason's tantrum. When I won the science fair, Mom swapping my painting ribbon for Mason's debate trophy during a family photo. Laughter rose, not bitter but buoyant, each story another plank in the bridge from then to now. Friday brought the Senate subcommittee hearing. Marble corridors echoed with shoe clicks and whispered agendas. I wore a navy suit Harper called bulletproof tailoring badge clipped statement memorized, but not robotic. When my turn arrived, I inhaled felt carpet beneath pumps and spoke about the pressure engineers face when deadlines marry shareholder greed about how unchecked ego nearly scattered orbital debris across flight paths, and about abuse flourishing behind reputations polished to mirror shine. Senators asked pointed questions. I answered with data affidavits and moments of candor that hushed the chamber. One doubted the scope. I responded by quoting Mason's own logbook entry referencing acceptable casualty ratios, the words projecting on screens like acid. Applause is banned during testimony, yet an exhalation swept spectators like shared wind. Outside microphones bristled, but Harper restricted commentary to policy. Our strategy had shifted from exposing rot to cultivating reform, and we wouldn't squander momentum on gossip. That weekend, Mom's estate sale headlined society pages, Chanel gowns sold at 50 cents on the dollar pearls, auctioned to finance shelter grants per the settlement. Reporters snapped her waving off questions, another cautionary tale of designer grief. She called once more, voice stripped raw. "Everything's gone." "Why aren't you satisfied?" I answered gently, surprised by my own serenity. "Because satisfaction isn't the objective. Integrity is." She didn't reply. Court calendars accelerated Dad's obstruction case merged with fraud counts. Mason pled guilty to conspiracy wire fraud and endangerment, hoping for single-digit years. During allocution, he read a statement blaming toxic family expectations, a half-truth that traced responsibility outward. I watched via live stream, unmoved, noting only that his tailored suit hung looser than the one he wore when clapping my humiliation. Sentencing would come, but closure no longer hinged on duration. Systemic change already outlived any term. Mid-April, the Juliet Initiative formally launched Harper's branding idea. My term's nonprofit advocacy funding. Safety audits across emerging aerospace startups. Scholarships for whistleblower retaliation, law research, art therapy for domestic violence survivors. Glenn sat on the board alongside Daria and a former NASA QC chief. Nora handled donor relations. Harper declined a directorship citing conflict of interest, but offered pro bono counsel for life. Our first grant saved a small propulsion lab from shuttering after they flagged microfissures in a fuel valve that could have cooked a desert launch pad. Their thank you email arrived the same morning Dad's bail hearing was denied due to flight risk concerns. I recognized poetic symmetry and forwarded the message to Dr. Larkin's subject line, "Evidence of breathing without shrinking." Summer warmed the city. I cycled along the river trail at dusk, helmet pressing still tender scars where hair regrew soft or stubborn. Children caught fireflies while skyscraper windows mirrored sunset. Each pedal stroke felt like writing punctuation at the end of a chapter I'd once feared would devour the book. Journalists occasionally requested exclusive memoir rights. I declined not from secrecy, but because the narrative now belonged to more than me, Daria Glenn. Every intern who sent anonymous tips once silence cracked. I settled instead on drafting a graphic novel script, melding aerospace diagrams with panels of personal resilience art as witness math as backbone. Dr. Larkin approved. Creativity, she said, metabolizes trauma into architecture. One July evening, I found an envelope beneath my door, no postmark, just my name in Dad's unmistakable angular script. Inside a single line, I finally see the cost and a clipping from his first motivational speaker brochure photo of him preaching about fearless authenticity. There was no apology, only acknowledgement edged with regret. I considered replying, decided truth is its own courier. His real response would be living within boundaries, law and conscience built. I slid the paper into a folder labeled Archive Memories, cataloged no longer burning. Late summer, the court issued final restitution orders. Funds transferred to the initiative and to employees fired under Mason's reign. North Star, under new leadership, invited me to tour redesigned testing facilities. I agreed contingent upon bringing a survivor cohort. Walking those corridors gleaming cautious, newly transparent, I felt neither triumph nor bitterness, only the sober joy of witnessing reform breathe. A young engineer approached, voice trembling. She almost quit when managers downplayed torque anomalies. My story, she said, gave her the spine to file an internal report. We shook hands. Impact, Dr. Larkin would later note, often blooms in someone else's quiet courage. Autumn crept in trees along my balcony, flaring copper. Glenn teased that my living room now resembled a mission control loft walls, pinned with non-profit flowcharts instead of legal timelines. Progress, I replied, is still scaffolding. One must keep tightening bolts. As leaves fell, Dad's trial commenced. I chose not to attend daily, trusting the system I'd helped galvanize. The verdict, guilty on 5 counts, arrived via phone alert while I painted under skylight. I let the notification chiming join brushstrokes, drawing the moment absorbed, but not defining. Sentencing set for December, but life no longer paused for each gavel strike. Mason's plea yielded 7 years. He sent a letter promising to read rehabilitation manuals. I forwarded resources to his counsel, not from obligation, but because cycles break when knowledge intrudes. Mom relocated to a smaller city, volunteering at a literacy center. Small steps may be genuine, maybe penance. I focused forward. The initiative expanded into drone manufacturing oversight. Trajectory toward university galleries, and the Senate passed the Integrity Act with bipartisan margin. During the signing ceremony, I stood in back heart, thudding like echo of first freedom. Reporters asked how it felt. I borrowed Dr. Larkin's phrasing, steady not loud, the sound of systems exhaling. Winter's first snow-powdered rooftops, the night I addressed a support group for survivors. I spoke of evidence chains, therapy homework, and the day satisfaction turned to purpose. When I finished, a teenager with a bruise blooming under concealer whispered, "I thought power was always theirs." I answered, "Power migrates to where truth gathers. Your turn will come." Walking home, flakes melted on my cheeks. They felt like small, cold benedictions. December drifted in, draped with pale sun, and the thin, metallic hush cities where before snow. Yet my days quickened. Momentum, once crisis-driven, now hummed like an underground river, guiding all the new structures we'd poured over the crater my family left. The Juliet Initiative opened its second satellite office in Denver, staffed by 2 former launch technicians who had resigned rather than falsify sensor logs. They designed a rapid audit protocol we nicknamed Snowcat, sleek enough that 3 aerospace startups adopted it within a month. Their gratitude emails felt more addictive than any victory against Dad ever had. Still, a final reckoning loomed his sentencing. The prosecution pushed for 12 years, citing obstruction, conspiracy, and the breadth of financial harm. His attorneys pled service and philanthropy, the same tarnished metals they'd polished all year. I debated attending. Dr. Larkin advised that closure arrives whether witnessed or not. But Glenn, ever pragmatic, reminded me that presence is power. So on the solstice, I buttoned a charcoal coat, pressed my palms against its pockets until muscles remembered calm, and walked into the courthouse where marble floors once echoed with my fear. Inside the gallery, Mom sat alone, cheeks, sharp hair, silver, where the salon once painted gold. She looked at me, a flicker of melancholy passing through those glacier blue eyes, then lowered her gaze as though concession itself might blind her. Mason's seat was empty still, completing intake protocols at a medium security facility 2 states south. So the dynasty Dad forged reduced to 2 brittle silhouettes in an oak-paneled room. When the judge pressed for a statement, Dad rose leaner, cuffless, but shackled by circumstance, and for a second, the charismatic architect of my nightmares resurfaced. He spoke of mistakes and sleepless nights, claimed epiphany, through the clarity my daughter's courage forced upon me. Yet his voice sought the old cadence of persuasion. The courtroom tuned now to different resonances, heard only craft. Sentencing landed at 10 years plus restitution monitoring. No applause, just collective exhale. Mom's shoulders wilted, but I felt no surge of triumph, only the settling weight of consequences overdue. Outside, microphones clamored. I issued a single line: accountability completes the circuit. Now we invest in safer skies. Reporters angled for emotion, but I walked away, snow beginning its soft assault flakes, catching courthouse lights like brief fireworks before melting. That evening, Harper, Glenn, Nora, and I convened at the loft, a ritual we called grounding our espresso miso soup. No legal talk for the first 15 minutes by decree. Harper toasted the end of Phase 1 litigation. Glenn gifted me a fountain pen engraved with the initiative's motto, "Integrity is inertia captured." Nora pinned a Polaroid of us, at 8, onto my corkboard, adjacent to the Axe signed copy. Joy threaded through fatigue, yet under the table, my phone vibrated a prison collect call from Mason, rejected by auto settings. I let it fade. Week between holidays, blurred with operational launches, awarding the first domestic violence art therapy grant, finalizing a collegiate aeronautics hackathon sponsorship, filming a short documentary where Daria explained torque calculations to high school girls in hoodies emblazoned with comic book heroines. Whenever imposter feelings surfaced, who was I to steer engineering ethics? I remembered the ballroom, the punch, the breathless minute, when humiliation threatened to calcify, and understood that survivors craft credentials from experience sharper than any diploma. New Year's Eve arrived snowy and loud. I hosted a gathering for initiative staff volunteers, gallery friends. Laughter coiled with saxophone riffs streaming from a neighbor's rooftop party. At midnight, I stepped onto the balcony, clutching sparklers shaped like shooting stars, and for the first time since childhood, wished without qualifiers. I wished for perseverance that didn't require catastrophe to assert itself. I wished my brother would use prison libraries rather than alliances. I wished my mother would someday speak truth, even if nobody blamed her for silence. January thawed streets into reflective slicks. One morning, an anonymous brown envelope slid beneath my door. Inside, pages torn from my old sketchbook. The ones I'd burned now badly scanned and captioned, "We can still rewrite the picture." A chill prickled Dad couldn't mail from prison yet. Mason lacked access, but Glenn traced postage to a P.O. box assigned to the private intelligence firm that once stalked me. Were loyalists still fishing? Harper filed the evidence with the U.S. Marshal's Office and amped cyber monitoring. I refused to cede mental acreage to phantoms. Instead, I funneled energy into capital advocacy, the Senate scheduled oversight hearings to finalize funding for the Integrity Act's auditing branch, and they asked me to co-chair a civilian advisory council. I accepted on one condition: include a rotating seat for a launchpad technician, because dashboards look different when you smell propellant. While drafting recommendations, I visited Denver to observe Snowcat in motion. In a converted warehouse, engineers and data scientists clustered around a live feed of microstrain sensors, red flag alerts pinging on a dashboard shaped like a constellation map. Each dot a potential fault line turned into conversation weeks before metal met vacuum. Watching them, I felt a kinship deeper than DNA could ever offer. We were all translating danger into design. February's first gust carried new headlines, North Star reeling, but restructured secured a modest NASA contract contingent on third-party audits, including ours. Market analysts framed it as a comeback. I framed it as proof that transparency scales. Yet success sprouted weeds. Rival lobbyists insinuated the initiative had undue influence. A think tank blog labeled me an aerospace Cassandra profiteering off fear. Harper laughed it off, but Daria reminded me that Greek myths end poorly when truth-tellers are isolated. We drafted a disclosure index outlining revenue streams and posted it publicly before breakfast. Critics deflated. Dr. Larkin applauded the proactive boundary, noting that resilience multiplies when trust is preemptive, not defensive. Mid-February, I agreed to a university town hall moderated by Sienna. Students packed the auditorium, buzzed on coffee and future angst. During Q&A, a sophomore asked if I forgave my father. Silence settled heavy. I answered, "Forgiveness is a landscape I'm mapping. Some paths will grow vines, others may clear. Today, I choose safe distance and forward motion." Applause rose subdued but sincere. Later that night, drafting notes, I realized no tremor followed the question. The old panic was gone, replaced by curiosity, evidence of healing's steady algorithm. March heralded Mason's first evaluative check-in. He'd enrolled in a restorative justice program, requested my participation. Harper outlined options. Dr. Larkin warned about emotional whiplash. I deliberated, then agreed to a written exchange mediated by a correctional facilitator, no direct calls. In his letter, Mason admitted orchestrating the forged psychiatric files, confessed he hadn't expected me capable of sustained resistance, and asked what restitution beyond money looked like. I replied that change must aim outward mentorship of at-risk youth inside prison engineering manuals donated to facility libraries. A public acknowledgement that male ego disguised as family legacy nearly cost orbital lives. Weeks later, he signed up to teach GED math. If cynicism whispered motive, I countered with Dr. Larkin's mantra, impact counts even when intention limps. Early spring thaw exposed fresh soil and latent tension. Mom requested a mediated meeting, claiming readiness to tell the whole truth for her own emancipation. Glenn vetted logistics. Harper insisted on neutral ground, a courthouse conference suite with 2 marshals posted. Mom arrived without pearls, clutching a paperback copy of The Body Keeps the Score, highlighted in pastel inks. She spoke for 40 minutes, unveiling layers of complicity, the hush money she funneled to cover Dad's prior misconduct. Her resignation to a life where appearances outranked decency, and the final straw, the moment she saw me bleed and realized she'd laughed. Tears blurred mascara into tributaries. I listened, an odd ache threading through ribs. When she finished, I said I couldn't resurrect trust yet, but I wouldn't block her path to accountability. She offered to volunteer full-time for the initiative's shelter program, starting with bookkeeping transparency, supervised by auditors. Harper drafted a contract. Glenn nodded. Spring rains washed grit from gutters. Cherry blossoms erupted along the river walk, petals swirling like fragile meteors. On April 1st, the anniversary of that ballroom blow, our nonprofit unveiled an open-source version of Snowcat, adapted for drone startups free under Creative Commons. Downloads spiked across 5 continents, within 48 hours. In celebration, the team gathered at the loft, now upgraded with skylight struts. Mason's bribe money once neglected. We projected global download dots on the brick wall, each glow a counter-memory to the 70 onlookers who'd stayed silent a year ago. As laughter ricocheted, my phone pinged a news alert Dad had chosen not to appeal, citing the cost to my family's ongoing repair. Whether humility or exhaustion fueled that decision. I accepted the closure, closed the alert, and turned back to friends, whose loyalty required no DNA. Night deepened. From the balcony, I watched barges nudge along the dark river, their running lights threaded like patient stitches. Overhead satellites traced silent arcs, confidence renewed by tests no longer rubber-stamped. Summer caught its stride, and with it, I finally felt the rhythm of days that didn't begin in court filings or end in press calls. Most mornings, I biked to the initiative's riverfront office, the path canopied by plane trees whose leaves flickered like an applause I carried in my wheels. Inside the hum wasn't panic, but progress, engineers refining Snowcat's drone version, caseworkers, matching shelter clients to art therapy cohorts, interns comparing supply chain ledgers against our new transparency index, so the next Mason never slipped a bribe through. Work once my escape hatch had become a habitat. One Friday in June, we hosted the first Integrity Hack launch, a 36-hour marathon where student teams hunted hypothetical safety flaws baked into mock satellite blueprints. At midnight, caffeine thick enough to varnish lungs, I wandered the auditorium rows and overheard a sophomore mutter, "Vance will ding us if the torque curves off by half a decimal." Instead of bristling, I grinned. Rigor now wore my surname. Near dawn, the winning group presented a patch that added just 5 grams of alloy, yet doubled shear tolerance. The judges, Daria, a NASA veteran, and a flight tech who'd once feared whistleblowing, stood to clap. I saw future launches breathing easier because these kids learned skepticism is a design tool, not a personality flaw. July opened with gentle upheaval, a letter from Dad's prison counselor reporting he'd joined a finance literacy teaching crew using his accounting skills for inmates prepping re-entry. Harper verified the program was legit. I felt no title forgiveness, but a quiet acceptance. Settled people change on timelines as irregular as comet tails. My job is to keep space clear so good trajectories aren't blocked. Mom, meanwhile, logged 200 volunteer hours and submitted quarterly audits that balanced to the penny. She and I communicated through project memos, neutral yet warm enough that possibility flickered. Larkin called that guarded reconciliation a bridge with toll booths but open lanes. Mason sent another mediated packet lesson plans from the GED classes notes scribbled in margins about load-bearing equations he'd rediscovered. He closed with, "Teaching this humbles me more than any boardroom ever could." I replied with an Engineering for Kids textbook recommendation. Healing. I'd learned sometimes travels by parcel post. Late summer delivered the Senate Advisory Council launch. In a paneled chamber, I took my seat beside a propulsion mechanic from Alabama and a commercial drone entrepreneur from Nairobi. Our charter review audit data flag legislative blind spots keep politics from sanding off safety edges. When cameras switched on, I thought of the ballroom's chandeliers. This lighting was brighter, yet I didn't shrink. Instead, I spoke of torque curves and trauma in the same breath, explaining how physical and moral structures fail for identical reasons. Pressure ignored cracks. Hidden maintenance deferred. A senator asked what keeps me motivated, now that the headlines faded. I answered, because a girl watching today will someday design the system that carries my grandchildren, and I want her to inherit a sky without shortcuts. Back home, Glenn surprised me with news that the private intelligence firm stalking me had filed for bankruptcy. Reputation, it turns out, is brittle when invoices surface during congressional subpoenas. We celebrated with street taco chaos on the balcony, while lights from barges shimmered below. He raised a Jarritos bottle to exits that close and doors that stay open. Harper chimed via speakerphone, announcing she'd accepted a judgeship proof that merit does rise when corruption clears out. September's crisp edges arrived, and so did the initiative's first international partnership, a South Korean startup adapting Snowcat for lunar lander struts. We hopped on a video call. They bowed, we waved, and somewhere across the Pacific, a woman my age mirrored my grin, united by math and resolve. That evening, Nora dragged me to a salsa class, claiming trustees need twirls. As music tangled our steps, I realized my body once braced for impact, now trusted rhythm with eyes closed. Autumn meant the 1-year mark of Dad's sentencing. I returned to the lakeside property, not to haunt pain, but to reclaim geography. The house sat shuttered slated for government auction. On the pier, I unpacked a sketch pad, charcoal smudging fingers that once shook. I drew the waterline, its mirrored sky, and in the corner, a tiny figure, fishing child me, revised safe, uninterrupted. Before leaving, I dropped a sealed envelope through the mail slot, a copy of that drawing for whoever bought the place, captioned, "Spaces can heal too." November crowned our nonprofit with an unexpected accolade, the International Safety Consortium's Catalyst Award. At the banquet, rows of engineers in bow ties applauded, while a hologram of a Snowcat robot prowled behind us. In my acceptance speech, I traced a line from one phone call on a freezing night to global audits that now flagged 12 major defects before prototypes even left KD. I ended courage isn't lone fire. It's a relay past the torch. The standing ovation felt less like praise and more like a promise fulfilled. Winter again. Snow spiraled outside the loft skylight as I curled on the sofa drafting the initiative's 5-year roadmap, expanding audits into urban air mobility, scaling art therapy grants, embedding ethics modules in engineering degrees. Mid-sentence, I paused, sensing stillness that wasn't emptiness. It was the ordinary light I'd chased. I messaged Dr. Larkin. Think I found that landscape of forgiveness. It has room for me to breathe even when memory drifts in. She replied with a digital confetti gif and the word grounded. New Year's Eve, 2 winters after the ballroom. The loft buzzed with friends, board members, students from the hack launch. At 11:59, we dimmed lights, cued a countdown projected onto the exposed brick. When 0 hit, fireworks spiderwebbed over the river. I touched the faint scar near my hairline. Not with sorrow, but gratitude. It mapped distance traveled. I thought of Dad teaching decimals, Mason explaining vectors, Mom reconciling shelter ledgers, and countless strangers anchoring satellites more honestly. In that mosaic, I saw no perfect redemption arc, just human momentum corrected by collective spine. After guests trickled out, I stepped onto the balcony alone. Snowflakes kissed railing iron. The river whispered steady beneath ice skim. Above, a satellite winked a speck of moving starlight I now trusted. I inhaled crisp air until lungs hummed drums of calm. Then softly, like offering bread to a dawn sky, I spoke the closing words of a story that began with torn scalp and shattered silence. The chain is broken, the orbit true. And inside that simple sentence, ordinary light shone bright enough to last longer than fireworks, bright enough to guide every launch yet to come.